We had two major and unfortunately very disappointing elections, mid-year off-cycle elections that happened here. Not in the congressional cycle, not in a presidential. You have the mayor of Chicago has been elected, and it is not the law and order candidate Paul Vallis. Brandon Johnson is now the new mayor of Chicago, the Windy City. He is a progressive. He's a socialist. He thinks that by creating more jobs, there'll be less crime. I saw your tweet, Clay. I think we'll spend more time on this and how did he win? What is wrong with the people of Chicago who voted for this guy? But get out of Chicago was your tweet. And to a lot of people, I think, unfortunately, that is the message. That is the message they should be hearing right now.
If you are in Chicago and you have the ability to leave, that is, you have the financial resources, you can do your job remotely, I would leave Chicago. And I don't say that lightly. And I'm saying that as a father of three. We know what the crime rate is in Chicago. As bad as Lori Lightfoot was, and I think arguably, Buck, she was the worst mayor in America. Chicago may have picked a worse replacement for her than Lori Lightfoot herself.
And one thing that's very, very true that I think we've seen a lot in the last few years with COVID and the BLM riots and all these things that have gone on, you're really casting your ballot in two ways as an American: who you vote for and who you pay taxes to. The one thing that gets the attention of these big cities, whether it's, New York or Chicago or LA or whatever, is, oh my gosh, we have a giant hole in our budget, in our socialist budget system that we've got going here, and we can't continue. So it matters. You vote with your feet as well as with the ballot.
And I've done that, Buck, in my own life. I'm born and raised, for those of you who know, in Nashville, Tennessee. That is Davidson County. I am so furious with how Davidson County responded to COVID that I don't think I'll ever live in Davidson County for the rest of my life, where downtown Nashville is. I live in Williamson County. Those of you who know the area, Franklin, Brentwood, just south of town. I don't think I'll ever own a home, pay property taxes in Davidson County again for the rest of my life. Born and raised in that county, lived in it until about 8 years ago when we moved out with the birth of our third son. And I don't know that I'll ever live in Davidson County again. Now, I own some property there, and certainly I go back and forth as anybody would who lives close to a city. But I'm so thoroughly disgusted with their management of COVID that I don't want to endorse it in any way.
So we have Chicago. We're going to analyze a little bit more about what happened in that. It was very tight. It was 51-49 in the percentage points breakdown between Johnson, the progressive who won, and Vallis, who was just, it's funny, Johnson was making Vallis seem like a right-wing guy, which is just further clarification that to say we're going to lock up violent criminals and try to make people safer on the streets is a right-wing position now.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat. If you're a Democrat who says, I don't think you should have to get arrested 100 times before you do real time. I don't think we should let convicted felons who get caught with loaded handguns on the streets of our cities go because social justice. If you take that position, you can lose to somebody who says you're a right-winger. And
yes,
that is what happened in Chicago in summary. But the other thing that came in last night, and this is a wake-up call, everybody. It's a wake-up call. The same way that what happened in 2022 with the ballot harvesting and the realities of the close races that we saw, places like Arizona and Georgia. And remember, we were saying, guys, we got to get the machines in place here to do what they're doing. A little bit of pushback, which I can understand from some people on the right. Now Trump says, you're going to lose if you don't do that, because he's seen the numbers. The data is very clear on this, all right? We just lost not only a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, but we lost overall control of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And this is the first time libs have had a majority on that court for 15 years, Clay. And it's a big deal because now they're going to ramp everything they can do in that critical battleground state that will help a Democrat in 2024. They're going to ram it through. And GOP, sleep at the wheel on this one. I don't know what else to say. Outspent dramatically, out-organized dramatically. So do we want to learn? Battleground state. How is this not even on the radar of major activists and national level Republicans.
Democrats are better at elections right now. I think you just have to accept that they are better at getting their votes out. They're more strategic. They are more cutthroat. They want to win more than Republicans do. And I think that's hard for people out there to understand. But when you look overall at the record, basically over what, Buck, the last 5-6 years? Since 2016, what can you point to and say, man, Republicans have run an incredible campaign and really kicked ass? I mean, we just had Joe Biden's the worst president in any of our lives. And we barely took back the House, and we were not able to take control of the Senate. In fact, we lost a seat. If you look at John Fetterman, there's no Republican equivalent of John Fetterman. Dude who can get elected to statewide office, can't even speak, immediately checks himself into a hospital, looks like Uncle Fester. They are committed to their ideas in a way that Republicans, frankly, are not. They're far more strategic. They're far more devious. They're winning.
Let's look at, you raised, where have we had a real bright spot, meaning a meaningful election in a highly contested election where it really came down to organizing, ground game. Messaging is obviously always important, but where the Republican showed us how it's done. And there have been a few of those cases. Let's give full credit to, first and foremost, on this list of governors, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. We were there on election night, ran up the scoreboard in a way that it was hard to say it out loud because you thought you were going to be made fun of because the number couldn't have been right. That was how I felt. I was like, no way he could have won by that many points.
19 points.
He did. So that was enormous. Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia. How did he win?
Yeah, I should have put him in. 21. That's probably the last. And what I mean when I'm saying I'm impressed by DeSantis and Brian Kemp in Georgia. They won big victories. Glenn Youngkin, I would say, Buck, is the only time maybe in the last 6 years where in an election that you didn't anticipate Republicans winning, a Republican found a way to win and did it in a way that everybody was like, wow, thank you.
The DeSantis win was so total that is noteworthy.
We knew he was going to win.
We knew he was going to get reelected. Youngkin was a huge shot across the bow to Democrats.
Yes.
Your point about Kemp, I think, is interesting, too, because it's worth remembering. I don't even think Kemp believes he's a national level guy, as in presidential race guy, but he's a good candidate for the state of Georgia. The people of Georgia like him. He understands the system. He understands his state. And that's something else that I think, it's very easy for some of these Republicans to, they have national level name recognition or they were famous or they're connected to, somebody big. Is this person a good candidate for that state? And that's something that I think we lose sight of, especially on the media side sometimes.
If I were running for president and I were the nominee as a Republican, I think I would pick Brian Kemp as my VP. I don't think Trump's going to do it. Maybe if DeSantis were the nominee, he would consider it. And the reason why, Buck, is complete strategy.
Yeah, deliver Georgia.
He would guarantee Georgia is, in my opinion, coming back into the red camp. He beat Stacey Abrams by 7.5 points. Usually the VP doesn't matter that much, but if you look at Trump, that was an 11 or 12,000 vote difference. I think Brian Kemp, given how popular he is, would put Georgia back into the Republican camp. And I think, look, some of those numbers on Glenn Youngkin are still pretty extraordinary. If you truly thought that you could put Virginia in play, then Glenn Youngkin as a vice presidential candidate would make a lot of sense. My concern with Trump, if he's a nominee, Buck, is he's just going to pick, and I'm not trying to take a shot here, Nikki Haley or Tim Scott or Kristi Noem, somebody who's already in, even maybe Carrie Lake, who I love, somebody who is in a state either that is already red or it does not have necessarily the pull to flip a state.
The Chicago race, and I think that we have to look at the markers here, look at the early indicators. The Chicago race shows you that Democrats are capable of voting for policies that are quite literally putting them at physical risk.
Yes.
And they're so ideologically devoted. So don't think, this place or this state has suffered so much that there are going to be Democrats who don't turn out. No, Democrat turnout in pretty much everywhere is effectively guaranteed. That's what we're up against. It's guaranteed. Obviously, Chicago is Democrat versus Democrat, but it just goes to show you their tolerance for bad policies, I think, is way more than people realize. So don't expect them to say, oh, well, they're doing a terrible job. Look at Gavin Newsom in California. There are tons of examples of this. And then the other thing is the ground game and the election architecture before Election Day matters. And what just happened in Wisconsin is we failed to focus enough on that election. Kelly was a very strong candidate. Daniel Kelly should have won that Supreme Court seat, state Supreme Court seat. And what now happens is we're behind the eight ball. Now we're going into Wisconsin 2024 with Democrats going to change the structure of the election in every way they possibly can. And what was the
20,000.
20,000. This stuff matters.
And Ron Johnson, our buddy, won by, I think, 26,000 votes roughly in Wisconsin for the Senate race that just took place in 2022. So, I mean, we're talking about absolute margin, tiny difference between victory and defeat. And Democrats have added a pretty substantial chess piece to their board.